She was 60 years old. Her nephrologist slid a folder across the desk with the word dialysis printed across the top, and told her to start preparing within the year. Her GFR sat at 54. Her potassium was creeping up at every blood draw. The clinic had already handed her the standard list of foods to avoid: no tomatoes, no oranges, no potatoes, no bananas, no leafy greens. 6 weeks later, her GFR climbed to 83. She did not start a new prescription. She did not change nephrologists. She did the exact opposite of what every well-meaning family member warned her about. She started eating the foods her doctor had crossed off the list. I went looking for the answer, because her case did not fit anything in the textbook. What I found was a quiet contradiction sitting inside decades of kidney advice, one most patients never hear from their care team. The real shift came from 4 things on her kitchen counter. Each one solves a problem that the low-potassium diet was never designed to fix, and one of them is the reason her blood pressure medication dose dropped in half. Before we get into how each one actually works inside the kidney, tell me in the comments how old you are, where you are watching from, and your most recent GFR or creatinine number. I will read through and answer as many as I can. For years, I used to believe that potassium was the silent enemy of every kidney patient. I would have told my own mother to throw the tomatoes out of the fridge and stop touching oranges. I was completely wrong about potassium, and I want to walk you through how the science actually reads today, because this single misunderstanding is keeping millions of people stuck. The old rule went like this: your kidneys are weak, therefore potassium will build up in your blood, therefore you must avoid every food that contains it. Out went the potatoes. Out went the tomatoes. Out went the citrus fruits, the leafy greens, the beans, the avocado. What patients were left with was a plate of white bread, white rice, and pale meat, and somehow this was called kidney-friendly. The newer research tells a different story, and it begins with a single word: bioavailability. The potassium inside a baked potato is not the same as the potassium dumped into deli meat or stirred into a sports drink. Plant potassium is wrapped in fiber, phytates, and cell walls, so your gut only absorbs a fraction of it. The inorganic potassium additives in processed foods, the ones listed on labels as potassium chloride or potassium phosphate, get absorbed at close to 100%. Plant potassium sits closer to 50 or 60% in most absorption studies. That single fact changes the entire equation. The mechanism goes deeper than absorption. When your kidneys lose filtering power, your colon quietly takes over. Healthy intestinal cells can pump potassium out into the stool, and in advanced kidney disease this pathway becomes the body's pressure release valve. Fiber feeds this process. Without enough plant fiber moving through the gut, potassium that should have left in the stool gets reabsorbed back into the blood. The food the old rules told you to avoid is the same food that helps your body clear potassium in the first place. There is also the acid problem. A diet built on meat, cheese, and processed grains generates a steady acid load that the failing kidney cannot neutralize. This is metabolic acidosis, and it physically pushes potassium out of your cells into your bloodstream. Plant foods do the opposite. They produce alkali, calm the acid load, and keep potassium where it belongs. This is not fringe thinking anymore. The 2020 KDOQI Nutrition Guidelines, written jointly by the National Kidney Foundation and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, formally moved away from blanket potassium restriction. They now recommend adjusting potassium intake based on actual blood levels and overall dietary pattern, not a fixed milligram cap printed on a handout. Reviews published in Nutrients and the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology between 2019 and 2022 reported that whole food plant-based diets did not produce significant hyperkalemia in stage 3 and stage 4 CKD patients who were also managing constipation and blood sugar. Now for how you actually use this. Eat your potassium from whole foods, not powders, not salt substitutes, not packaged broths. If you boil vegetables, you lose roughly 30 to 50% of the potassium into the cooking water, which is useful when your blood numbers are running high but unnecessary when they are stable. Spread your fruit through the day rather than eating 3 pieces at once. Read every processed label for the letter K followed by phosphate or chloride. That is the potassium that actually hurts you. Now that the old fear is out of the way, I can show you the 4 foods that turn this woman's GFR around in 6 weeks, beginning with the one that quietly lowered her blood pressure enough for her doctor to cut her medication dose in half. If you want to lower your blood pressure enough to ask your doctor about reducing your ACE inhibitor or ARB dose, start with hibiscus tea. This is the deep red infusion made from the dried calyces of Hibiscus sabdariffa, the same plant you may know as roselle or sour leaf. The active compounds are anthocyanins, particularly delphinidin-3-sambubioside and cyanidin-3-sambubioside, along with hibiscus acid and a family of polyphenol. The mechanism is gentle but real. These compounds act on the renin-angiotensin system in a way that resembles a low-dose ACE inhibitor. They relax the blood vessel walls through improved nitric oxide signaling, and they produce a mild diuretic effect that lowers fluid volume without forcing the kidneys. A 2015 meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials published in the Journal of Hypertension found an average reduction of 7.58 mm of mercury in systolic pressure and 3.53 mm of mercury in diastolic pressure with daily hibiscus consumption. Those numbers may sound small until you realize this is the same effect size as adding a low-dose pharmaceutical, without the side effect of raising your serum potassium the way ACE inhibitors and ARBs notoriously do. The way to take it is simple. Use 1 to 2 grams of dried hibiscus calyces, around 1 heaped teaspoon, steep in hot water for 5 to 10 minutes, and drink 1 to 2 cups per day. Morning is the best window. Do not add sugar, do not add salt, and avoid drinking it within 2 hours of taking your blood pressure medication because the effects can stack. Give it 6 to 8 weeks before rechecking your numbers, then bring those numbers to your nephrologist. If you want your kidneys to stop carrying the entire burden of clearing potassium, the next move is feeding your gut more fiber. Most kidney patients are eating between 10 and 15 grams a day. The number you actually need is closer to 25 to 30 grams. Here is why that gap matters. In a person with healthy kidneys, roughly 20% of dietary potassium leaves through the stool and the rest goes through urine. When the kidneys lose filtering power, the intestine begins to compensate, and in advanced CKD the colon can clear 40 to 50% of total potassium, with some reports pushing closer to 80% of the daily excreted amount in patients eating a fiber-rich diet. Fiber is what makes that pathway work. Soluble fibers like beta-glucan from oats, pectin from apples and pears, and psyllium husk feed the bacteria in your colon. Those bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids that pull potassium into the stool and shorten transit time. A 2012 analysis published in the journal Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology, drawing on NANS data, found that every 5-gram increase in daily fiber was associated with significantly lower mortality in CKD patients. Practical use looks like this. Start with 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed in the morning. Add half a cup of cooked steel-cut oats, not instant. Stir 1 teaspoon of psyllium husk into a glass of water before lunch. Eat 1 cup of well-rinsed cooked beans 3 times a week. Drink at least 1.5 liters of water across the day, because fiber without water makes constipation worse, not better. If you want a single fruit that handles antioxidant load and constipation in one swing, the answer is Amla. This is the Indian gooseberry, Phyllanthus emblica, and it carries one of the highest natural concentrations of vitamin C of any food, around 600 mg per 100 grams of fresh fruit. Alongside the vitamin C are tannins called emblicinin A and emblicinin B, plus gallic acid and ellagic acid. These compounds quench the oxidative stress that drives kidney scarring, and the fruit's natural acid and fiber content produce a gentle laxative effect. The connection to potassium is indirect but powerful. The longer food sits in your intestine, the more potassium gets reabsorbed back into the blood. Amla keeps things moving. Small clinical studies, including work in phytotherapy research in several Ayurvedic medical journals, have reported reductions in oxidative markers and improvements in bowel regularity in CKD patients. I want to be honest with you here. The body of large, high-quality randomized trials on Amla and kidney disease remains limited, so treat it as a strong supporting food, not a standalone cure. How to take it? 1 to 3 grams of dried amla powder stirred into warm water on an empty stomach in the morning, or 1 fresh fruit chewed slowly. If you are buying powder, look for cold processed versions rather than spray dried, because heat destroys much of the vitamin C. Begin with a smaller dose for the first week, as some people experience loose stools. If you want to neutralize the silent acid building up in your blood, the last piece is lemon water. As your kidneys lose function, they lose the ability to excrete acid from your diet. This condition is called metabolic acidosis, and it does something very specific to potassium. Acid pushes potassium out of your cells into your bloodstream, raising the number on your lab report even when you have not eaten a single banana. For every drop of 0.1 in blood pH, serum potassium can rise by roughly 0.6 milliequivalents per liter. The active compound in lemon is citrate. Once swallowed, citrate is metabolized into bicarbonate, the same substance your doctor prescribes in pill form as sodium bicarbonate to slow CKD progression. A 2013 study by Drive Nimrit Garaya and Dr. Donald Wesson, published in the American Journal of Kidney Diseases, showed that adding alkali-producing fruits and vegetables to the diet of stage 3 CKD patients slowed GFR decline over 3 years, with effects comparable to oral bicarbonate tablets. To use it, squeeze half a fresh lemon into a glass of warm water and drink it first thing in the morning before food. Repeat with a second glass in the late afternoon. Do not add sugar. If your teeth are sensitive, drink through a straw and rinse your mouth with plain water afterward. Avoid bottled lemon juice, because most of the active citrate is lost during processing and preservation. These 4 foods are what moved her GFR from 54 to 83 in 6 weeks. But there is a reason the same foods do not work for everyone, and it comes down to 4 hidden triggers that keep potassium climbing no matter what you eat. Coming up next, I want to walk you through the exact checklist she used when her readings spiked, including the constipation rule, the blood sugar trigger most patients never think about, and the dialysis machine adjustment most clinics will not mention unless you ask for it by name. The 4 foods give you the building blocks. But if your potassium reading still climbs after you change your diet, the problem is not the food on your plate. The problem is one of 4 hidden triggers, and every kidney patient I have studied through these recoveries followed roughly the same checklist to address them. The strategy that makes potassium clearance more effective starts in the colon. When stool sits in the intestine too long, potassium gets pulled back into the blood through the colonic wall, and your gut loses its second chance to remove it. Treating constipation is not cosmetic, it is a direct potassium intervention. The most studied natural laxatives for this purpose are prunes and papaya. Prunes contain sorbitol, a natural sugar alcohol that works as an osmotic laxative, along with phenolic compounds and roughly 6 grams of fiber per 100 grams of fruit. Papaya contributes pectin, a soluble fiber, and papain, an enzyme that supports digestion. A 2011 randomized trial published in Alimentary Pharmacology and Therapeutics compared 50 grams of prunes twice daily against psyllium husk in adults with chronic constipation, and the prune group went from an average of 1.7 spontaneous bowel movements per week to 3.5, outperforming the psyllium arm. The way to use this is 5 to 10 pitted prunes in the morning, soaked overnight in water if your teeth are sensitive, with half a ripe papaya at lunch or as an evening snack, paired with 1.5 to 2 liters of water spread across the day. The strategy that makes potassium control more effective next is keeping your blood sugar steady. Most kidney patients have either diabetes or some degree of insulin resistance, and this is where things quietly go wrong. Insulin is the hormone that pushes potassium from your bloodstream back into your cells through the sodium-potassium ATPase pump. When your blood sugar climbs and your insulin response is sluggish, that pump slows down. Potassium drifts out of the cells and accumulates in the blood. In diabetic patients with relative insulin deficiency, every 100 mg per deciliter rise in glucose can lift serum potassium by 0.3 to 0.6 milliequivalents per liter. The KDOQI 2022 Diabetes and CKD guideline recommends targeting an HbA1c between 6.5 and 8% depending on individual risk. Spread your carbohydrates across 3 small meals rather than 2 large ones. Choose intact grains over flour, and walk for 15 minutes after dinner. That single walk drops post-meal glucose by roughly 20 to 30% in most studies on older adults. The strategy that makes blood pressure control more effective is broader than the prescription pad. Relying only on medication forces your nephrologist to keep raising the dose of ACE inhibitors and ARBs, both of which retain potassium as a built-in side effect. The way out is lifestyle that reduces the kidney load itself. Cut sodium to under 1,500 mg per day, which is roughly 2/3 of a teaspoon of salt across all foods. Adopt a DASH-style plate, meaning half vegetables, a quarter whole grains, and a quarter lean plant or fish protein. Walk 30 minutes most days. The SPRINT trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2015, showed that intensive blood pressure lowering to a systolic target below 120 mm of mercury reduced major cardiovascular events by 25% and all-cause mortality by 27% compared to the standard target. For a patient with kidney disease, that translates into less medication pressure and a more stable potassium baseline. The final strategy is for those of you already on dialysis, and it is the one most patients never get told to ask about. If your potassium is unstable between sessions, the dialysate bath itself may be the issue. Standard dialysis runs on a potassium bath of 2.0 milliequivalents per liter. But if your blood potassium is consistently high before treatment, your nephrologist can adjust this to 1.0, with careful monitoring for arrhythmia risk. The other lever is KT/V, the standard measurement of dialysis adequacy, which the DIALYSIS hemodialysis adequacy guideline recommends keeping at a single pool target of at least 1.4 per session for 3 times weekly treatment. If your number is hovering at 1.2, you are underdialyzing, and potassium is one of the first values to drift. Ask for your last 3 KDOQI reports at your next clinic visit and bring them home with you. These 4 levers together are what move a stuck potassium reading off the chart and back into a safe range. But there is one detail in this woman's protocol that I have not told you yet: the quiet evening habit her nephrologist credited with the final 20-point climb in her GFR. The evening habit her nephrologist credited was a 30-minute walk after dinner. That is the entire reveal. No exotic supplement, no expensive program, just movement at the right time of day. And that is exactly the problem with how kidney disease is taught to patients. The interventions that actually move the numbers are quiet, inexpensive, and almost always missing from the printed handout you walk out of the clinic with. What I want you to remember is this: you are not failing the protocol if you have been following the old potassium restrictions and your GFR is still slipping. The protocol failed you. The science has moved on, and most clinics simply have not caught up yet. That gap is the reason this channel exists. If you want me to keep sharing these cases and the science behind them, subscribe and turn on notifications so the next one lands in your feed. Leave your age, your latest kidney numbers, and the country you are watching from in the comments. I read every one, and the patterns you share help me choose what to cover next. Until then, take care of yourself, share this with someone who needs it, and I will see you in the next video.